I've always considered myself a thoughtful person when it comes to relationships. When I started dating Sophie, I wanted everything to be perfect. She's 25, I'm 28, and from the very first date, I noticed just how important her friends were to her. At the time, I thought it was sweet, a group of people who genuinely cared about her well-being. But over the course of our 8-month relationship, their presence started to feel more like a third wheel than anything else. At the beginning, I thought the whole friend approval thing was kind of charming. Before she even agreed to go on a date with me, Sophie told me that her friends needed to check me out. I was new to this, but I went along with it. I wanted to be with Sophie, and if this was part of the package, so be it. We met at a bar one evening, and her friends grilled me with questions, but overall, they seemed to like me. At least, I thought so. As the months went by, it became clear that Sophie didn't do anything without consulting them. I'd ask her to go out on a weekend, and she'd reply, "Let me see what the girls are up to first." I understood friends are important, but it stung a bit. I was her boyfriend, and yet, it felt like I was competing for her time. I decided to let it slide, chalking it up to her being used to that dynamic. But the tipping point came when her birthday started approaching. Sophie had been talking about how much she'd always wanted a romantic beach getaway with her partner, something out of a movie, where she could relax by the water and unwind. As her birthday got closer, I thought it'd be the perfect time to plan that special trip. I wanted to make it a surprise, so I took time off work, researched destinations, and found a beautiful beach resort about 2 hours away. I booked a suite, planned a spa day, made reservations at a nice restaurant, and I was genuinely excited. This was going to be a birthday Sophie would never forget. Then, out of the blue, just 3 days before her birthday, Sophie sat me down. She told me that her friends had been planning a birthday night out for her and that she wanted to spend her actual birthday with them instead. The way she said it, so casually, made my stomach drop. I tried not to let the disappointment show on my face, but inside, I was crushed. I had gone through all this effort, and now she was telling me she'd rather spend her birthday with her friends instead of me. I took a deep breath and asked, "Can't you reschedule with them? I had something planned for us." She gave me that slightly annoyed look, the one that told me she thought I was being difficult. "It's just one night. I see you all the time, but my friends, I don't get to hang out with them as much. I'm sure we can do something the next day." I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell her that I'd planned something special for her birthday. But the way she said it, as if spending her birthday with me was less important, made me hesitate. I didn't want to come off as controlling or unreasonable. So I swallowed my frustration and said, "Okay, if that's what you want." She smiled, kissed me on the cheek, and thanked me for being understanding. I wasn't understanding, though. I was hurt. I spent the next 2 days debating what to do. I could have told her about the trip, but something in me resisted. If she didn't want to be with me on her birthday, I wasn't going to beg. So, I called the resort and canceled the reservation. On her birthday, I stayed home while Sophie went out with her friends. I didn't hear from her all night, except for a quick text saying they were heading to a club. Meanwhile, I sat on my couch, replaying the events in my head. I could have been at the beach with her, sharing a quiet dinner by the ocean. Instead, I was alone, wondering if I was just an afterthought in her life. The next day, Sophie came over like nothing had happened. She was in a great mood, all smiles and excitement. She went on and on about how her friends had thrown her a surprise at the club, how they had bought her drinks, and how fun the night was. She didn't even seem to notice how distant I was being. I excused myself to the bathroom, feeling the weight of it all hit me. When I came back into the living room, I noticed Sophie holding my phone, a frown forming on her face. My heart sank immediately. She'd seen a message from the resort confirming the cancellation of the trip. "What's this?" she asked, holding up the phone. Her voice was cold, completely different from the cheerful tone she had just minutes earlier. I hesitated, trying to think of the right words. "I had planned a trip for us, to a beach resort, for your birthday." Her eyes widened, but instead of looking touched, she looked angry. "And you canceled it." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Sophie, you made it pretty clear you wanted to spend your birthday with your friends. What was I supposed to do? You could have told me." She snapped. "You know, I would have chosen the trip if I knew about it. But you didn't say anything, and now you've ruined everything." My patience, already thin, snapped. "Ruined everything? You chose them over me, Sophie. I planned something special, and you didn't even ask what I had in mind. You just assumed I'd be fine sitting at home while you partied with your friends." Sophie's face twisted with anger. "You're being ridiculous. This is my birthday. If I want to spend it with my friends, that's my choice. I shook my head, feeling a mixture of frustration and sadness. You don't get it, do you? It's not just about the birthday. It's about always coming second to them. Every time I make plans, you have to check with them first. I thought we were in a relationship, but it feels like I'm dating you and your friends. She stood up, tears welling in her eyes, but her expression was still angry. Maybe I should have spent my birthday with someone who actually understands me. That was the final straw. Maybe you should, I replied, my voice flat. She grabbed her bag and stormed out of my apartment, slamming the door behind her. The silence that followed felt heavier than anything I'd ever experienced. For the rest of the day, I kept replaying the argument in my head. Had I gone too far? Should I have just told her about the trip? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this wasn't just about the trip. It was about a deeper issue, her constant prioritization of her friends over our relationship. A few days passed, and we hadn't spoken. Her friends, who had always been a bit passive-aggressive toward me, blocked me on social media. Some of them even posted cryptic messages about how Sophie deserved better. It was clear they were pushing her to break up with me. I started to wonder if this was it, if our relationship was really over. And if it was, would it be such a bad thing? I didn't want to be in a relationship where I was always second place. But despite everything, I still cared about Sophie. I wanted things to work out. Then, out of nowhere, Sophie showed up at my door one evening. She looked different, nervous, vulnerable. She was holding a box of chocolates and a small bouquet of flowers, which threw me off. Sophie wasn't the type to apologize easily, let alone show up with gifts. Can we talk? She asked softly. I stepped aside and let her in, unsure of where this was going. We sat down, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Sophie seemed real. Not the carefree, confident girl who was always surrounded by friends, but someone who looked conflicted, scared. I'm sorry, she said after a long pause. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about my friends. And, you're right, that wasn't what I expected to hear. What do you mean? She sighed, looking down at her hands. I talked to my friends after the fight. They told me I should break up with you. They even suggested that I should go on a date with another guy to make you jealous. My heart sank. Did you? No, she said quickly. No, I didn't. That's when I realized how toxic they were being. They weren't trying to help me, they were trying to control me. For the next hour, Sophie poured her heart out. She told me how her friends had always had a say in her life, from who she dated to where she worked. It had been like that for years, but she'd never noticed it until now. When they suggested she hurt me to get back at me, it opened her eyes to how manipulative they were. I cut them off, she said quietly. I don't need friends who treat me like that. It was a lot to take in, but I could see how much this had affected her. She was trying to make things right, and I couldn't help but admire her for it. I'm sorry. I didn't appreciate the trip, she said, tears welling in her eyes again. You didn't deserve that. I reached out, taking her hand. We can still go, I said. Maybe not for your birthday, but we can go next weekend. She smiled, and for the first time in days, it felt like we were on the same page.